after tonight. There we are. That's the cue. So probably enough for me, but outside, hand over to you, Dave, ready to walk us through tonight. You're focusing on scrub and warblers tonight, only, which is, I guess, the theme of your next visit to Ivanhoe. So I shall leave the intro over to you, Dave, and let you get started, if that's all right.
Okay, you've got my screen there.
Yeah, and as with everything, I guess, guys, if you want to ask a question, I guess jump in or in the chat, and I'll keep going. I'll keep monitoring the chat, and
you can monitoring the chat.
Monitor the chat, great. And I'll dip in with a question. But over to you, Dave. Okay,
cool. Can you all see the screen? Good evening. See me? Can you see the slides, or can you see me? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
excellent. I can see both, David.
Right. Okay, so good evening to everybody. Thanks for coming along. It's going to be a fairly sort of focused session this evening. We're not going to cover too many species, but we're going to spend sort of a bit of time and try and make sure that everybody understands the differences between the species that we're going to be talking about, and to make it easier for when you're out there surveying to know which one's which and what to listen for and what to look for. So the focus this evening is on scrub birds, and what we mean by scrub. It's an important wildlife habitat. It's sort of a transition between field or meadow and woodland, and can consist of hedgerows, can consist of clumps, copses, just groups of vegetation that are growing up, from blackthorn, whitethorn, blackberry, all sorts of different plants, provide opportunities for shelter for birds, insects, and obviously provide a lot of fruit and seeds in the autumn for migrating birds and for insects and butterflies and so on. Also provide cover for a lot of the smaller mammals, voles, mice, and so on. And as a result, they can be quite nice areas to see things like kestrels, barn owls hunting in the evenings along these sorts of areas along the grass that tends to surround them. But you can find scrub anywhere pretty much. Obviously, Steps Hill and Ivanhoe Beacon, where we're going to be on Saturday and next and the Saturday after. There's a lot of scrub to the north of the wood, and then there's a bit of scrub sort of as you go up to Ivanhoe Beacon itself, and we'll be focusing on those areas. And if we go up Lodge Hill, there's not so much scrub there now, but there's still areas of scrub down at the bottom of the hill where there'll be a lot of warblers and insects and butterflies and so on. But it can occur anywhere. It could be a clump in a field which is big enough to harbour a pair or two of whitethroats or blackcaps and that sort of thing. So it's a good habitat, and is exploited by a lot of insects, mammals, and also birds. Species that you may encounter, the ones in the left-hand column are the ones that we're going to focus on this evening. So these are the warblers, but also in terms of the ones in the brackets and the middle and right-hand columns are also the species that you could expect to find in this sort of habitat. Obviously, wood pigeon will appear anywhere. Dunnock, robin, song thrush, blackbird will be in the bigger thickets. Wren, snarling. Obviously, the tits will be around. It's a good area for long-tailed tits to nest. I think snarling's down there twice. Apologies for that. And then obviously we've got the greenfinches, the bullfinches, the various finches that exploit some of the open land, as well as the flowers and the seeds that crop up on the plants themselves in the shrub. So as I said, we're going to focus on the warblers. I just thought it might be worth actually sort of thinking about what are the warblers themselves. I mean, we talk about warblers, and we talk about finches, and we talk about all the various different groups of pigeons and crows and that sort of thing. But warblers are not just something that occur in Europe. They are worldwide, and there are an awful lot of different types of warblers. So scientific classification has defined them into various different groups. The two top groups, if you like, the top split between the warblers are the old world warblers, which are the ones that occur in Europe and Asia. And then there's the New World warblers, which are the ones that occur in North and South America. In the Old World, our world, there's the following subgroups that occur in Europe. What I want to do is to try and use these names to instill in you sort of some of the differences between the various genus warblers that there are. So in Europe, we have the Prinias, which don't occur in Britain, small streaky warblers that occur in sort of more desert type scrub in Southeast Europe and the Middle East. Sylvia warblers, which are some of the ones that we're going to be covering tonight. Overall, there's about, well, depending on whether you follow the splits or not, there's upwards of 25 different species of Sylvia warblers, which we get half dozen or so in the UK. Acrocephalus warblers. Now, these are the warblers of the wetland. So these are the reed warblers, the great reed warblers, Sarvi's warblers, Chetty's warblers, and so on, that you'll find in scrub and in the reed beds. So scrub inside the reed beds and the reed beds themselves. So reed warblers are a bird of the reeds, and sedge warbler is a bird of the scrub, mostly within the reed beds, but we will cover that species tonight. The Locustella warblers, which these are the warblers that tend to sit inside thickets of low scrub and within reed beds and also in fields. And typical, the UK example of a Locustella warbler is the grasshopper warbler. And most of the birds in this genus, their song is fairly similar, being similar to that of a grasshopper. We also have the Hippolaeus warblers, none of which occur as breeders in the UK. We occasionally get things like icterine and melodious warblers occurring in the UK on passage, but otherwise we don't tend to get very many of those. And then we have the leaf warblers, and these are the birds such as the willow warbler, chiffchaff, yellow-browed warbler, Pallas's warbler, and various other species. And the further east you go, the more species of leaf warblers you will encounter. And they are some of the most delightful species of the warbler family. And then finally we've got the crests, so the gold crest and the fire crest, which we get both in the UK. So which ones are the scrub warblers? Well, it's not just down to one division here. So you look at the grass birds on the left of this picture, which I've taken from Birds of the World, Handbook to Birds of the World. Most of those species, all of those groups under the grass birds don't occur in the UK. A lot of them are primarily sort of African in their nature. We've then got the Acrocephalini, and these are the reed warblers and their allies. So looking down, you've got things like Chettia, which is the genus for the Chetty's warbler, which is the UK example. You've got Locustella, which are the grasshopper warblers, Acrocephalus, reed warblers, Hippolaeus, etc. Then you've got the leaf warblers, of which there are, it says there are 97 species. And this is the yellow-browed warbler, the willow warbler, the wood warbler, the chiffchaff, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, we have the sylvidae, which are the true scrub warblers. And there's at least 25 species in this group, depending on the various splits. So there are physiological differences between all of these different groups, and also the genus within the high-level groups. So, for example, within the reed warblers, you have the Acrocephalus, which are the true reed warbler, builds its nest in the reeds, lives in the reeds, on migration will stop in scrub and various other places to feed up. But the locustella, these are similar initially to the sort of the reed warblers, but they have a different shaped tail. They have a much longer set of tail coverts, and their plumage is much sort of thicker and denser. And that's just one example of the differences between the genus. So in the UK, what we're looking at from the point of view of the UK scrub warblers, we're looking at blackcap, garden warbler, lesser whitethroat, common whitethroat, and Dartford warbler. Now, these 5 are members of the Sylvia genus, or the true scrub warblers. We'll cover 4 of these tonight. We won't be covering Dartford warbler because that's much more specialised in its requirements for habitat. It's much more a bird of the gorse and scrub and open heathland. So one of their strongholds would be somewhere like the New Forest and the Surrey Heaths. Then we're looking at the chiffchaff and the willow warbler, which are the Philoscopus warblers, so leaf warblers. And then we're looking at sedge warbler, which is an example of the Acrocephalus group. And then we'll look at the grasshopper warbler, which is a member of the Locustella group. So hopefully we'll spend a bit of time on these, and at the end of it, you'll have a much clearer understanding of the differences between the various different species. We're going to start off with the blackcap. Now, this is the key bird, really, that you need to get into your mind as to how it sounds, how it looks, and its general sort of jizz in terms of shape, size, and habitat. This is the probably now the commonest of the scrub warblers that we're likely to encounter. As we discussed on previous talks, there's a wintering population now that come in from Eastern Europe and spend the winter feeding on our bird feeders, and starting in sort of March they start to sing, which is just before they're feeding up, and then they depart sort of middle of March. And there's a very short gap, and then the northward bound blackcaps from Africa are starting to appear and are now fairly common, even at this stage of the spring, are fairly common throughout woodlands and scrublands in most parts of the county, if not the country. Fairly sort of drab in terms of coloration. The male is quite sort of grey-brown, paler grey on the underparts and the sides of the face, and has the if you get to see it, then it has this obvious black cap, which is diagnostic. And then the female is a browner bird, and it's not so grey as the male, fairly sort of unicolor, and bear that in mind when we look at the garden warbler. Fairly unicolor, but it has this nice brown cap, which again, if you see it, is diagnostic. So looking at the pictures on the right, need to remember this when it comes to the key thing in terms of separating these from the other scrub warblers is the sort of the length of the tail and the overall coloration. If you don't get to see the top of the head, so even if it's bird sitting in a tree in a bush somewhere in some scrub, even if you don't get to see the head, you can still probably get to identify it, down to the fact that the males are sort of this grey colour, and their tail is sort of medium length. And obviously, if you're getting the male and it's the right time, then they'll be singing. And this is the one thing that we should need to focus on. Females, if you don't see the head, are going to be more similar to the garden warbler. And again, bear in mind that it's sort of browny, and has a medium length tail. So we'll listen to the song, and this is the one thing that will help you to identify the species as you're traversing your sectors, and you don't need to necessarily stop and see the bird, but once you've heard it, this is the key song to remember. Oops, going back. If I can play it. No, what's going on here? Going too fast. Apologies for this. There we go. Oh, I've just got to. Let me play the song. Okay, hang on. I'm going to come out of that for a sec. I'm going to go in. Oh, no. It all worked so well earlier.
I'd love to offer you some advice, David, how to do it, but I'm not entirely sure I can.
That would be
outside of maybe not doing it in the full slideshow.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at different ones. Right, can you see my screen still, or do I need to reshare?
You need to reshare, David.
Okay. Let's do that. Okay, this one should work. Right, there we go. We're going to share screen and we're going to share sound.
That song was playing okay for me when you did it then. I don't know what if you.
Okay, I was trying to turn the volume up for myself because I couldn't hear it.
Oh, okay.
Now my cursor's gone. Right, everybody, let's do this again.
While you're having a bit of go with that, Dave, if
Right, can you all hear me still?
can hear you, yeah.
Can you see the screen?
I can see the screen.
Not play.
It might be something about you. It says on the top of the screen, Dave, it's enable editing. Is that if you take that off, does that make a difference?
Oh, there we go. Can everybody hear that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, cool, thank you. So,
Dave, I've had a question in the chat.
yeah,
Was it still playing? From Rosie around, does blackcap sound similar to Dunnock?
The easy answer is yes and no. Dunnock always tends to me to sound as though it's in a hurry.
Yeah.
It tends to almost trip over the notes it's trying to deliver as fast as possible. Blackcap is slightly slower, more considered. It's not as slow as a song thrush, but it'll last longer and will sound as though it's sort of more considered than a Dunnock. The thing to remember is with a blackcap, and it's particularly relevant against the garden warbler, is that there's always a section within a blackcap song of there's 5 or 6 very fluty sort of notes, and I'll play the song again because if you listen to the blackcap song, it will do it. It does it on pretty much 99 out of 100. So it's all this one almost sounds a little bit sort of blackbird-like.
Yeah,
it hasn't got so much of the scratchiness in it, but you will get blackcaps that do sound quite scratchy, but they will always come back to doing some of that fluty melodic sound.
To me, David, kind of something that really stuck with me. If you remember the BLAC of black, becomes loud and clear. To me, you get that really scratchy start as if it's going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
And then suddenly bursts into this kind of pure, louder, kind of purer kind of song. If that helps, so that BLAC becomes loud and clear may or may not help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one to remember. And the song will last for 5 to 25-30 seconds. But it will stop a maximum of sort of 30 seconds. It won't go on much longer than that. And that's again something to think about when you're trying to work out whether it's a blackcap or a garden warbler, because garden warblers will continue for longer. They'll ramble on for a minute or more sometimes. But it is this flutiness. And what I'll do is before Nick puts the presentation up, I'll make sure we get the sounds into the presentation so that when he puts it up, you'll be able to play them to yourselves. What's that?
Before we leave,
all the time.
Before we leave blackcap, Dave, there's a question from Colin too. Colin's asking, does a blackcap leave a constant break between melodies?
No, it's not constant. Sometimes they'll stop, and this will depend. I mean, this is the interesting thing about this time of year, that birds do sing while they're on the move. So sometimes they'll sing, and then they'll stop, and that's because they're moving through, they're feeding, or they're still migrating north. And therefore they will stop, and you might not hear them again. So it all depends. If it's a male on territory, it will sing more and more regularly if there's a bird on a territory right next to it. So it's not something that you can judge them by in terms of what species it is, depending on how long there is between each of the song periods. But the song period is normally a maximum of up to about 30 seconds for a blackcap. Does that answer the question okay?
Yes, thank you.
You got it, yep.
Okay, cool. So while we're on this one, which has definitely got the songs that work, we'll go on to garden warbler now. We'll look at the this is it's quite interesting that this is called, well, it's called, but its Latin name is Sylvia boring. Some people call it Sylvia boring because it's fairly plain, So compared with the blackcap in the previous pictures, you can see that it is pretty sort of almost sort of female chaffinch-like in terms of coloration. Obviously, it hasn't got the white on the wings and so on, but what it has got and is characteristic for the species, if you can see where my cursor is, you've got this grey mark coming around the back of the ear coverts and then coming down to the corner of the wing, and so that is diagnostic for this species. So if you can see that, that's very useful. But otherwise, it is a similar sort of size and shape to the blackcap, maybe slightly sort of plumper and maybe slightly shorter tailed, but that can be very difficult to tell in the field. But have a look at the back of the face and look for this grey mark. As a species, it tends to sit more in trees rather than low bushes, especially when it's singing. That's not diagnostic, but it tends to be a bit of a clue as to which species you might be looking at. The song is quite fluty, but one of the things that can help you to differentiate, as I said, is the fact that the song it will go on much longer than a blackcap would. Both the sexes are similar, so both the same colour. So as you say, it's got to down to sort of looking at this grey neck side, and if there's nothing specific about it that you can see, then there's a good chance it could be a garden warbler. But let's listen to the song. So that sound clip was about the same length as the whole of the blackcap sound clip, and that was pretty much one bird singing all the time. And it was, to me, it's almost like a bit of a conversational warble. It's much more of a warble than the blackcap. It just goes on, and sometimes you don't initially pick it up as something that's singing. It's the blackcap will start and it's loud, and it will hit you that that's a warbler. Which one is it? Whereas the garden warbler could be singing away, and you move closer to it, and then you suddenly pick up on the fact that there is something singing, and it's singing on quite a continual basis. So I'll play it again. But what's actually quite interesting there is at about 35 seconds, there's actually a bit of a blackcap comes in behind it and sings there. But that was very, very typical of a garden warbler. Will just ramble on for quite a long time, and and then stop. And then again, depending on what it's doing, what the competition is, what the food situation is, the gap between its singing will vary. But yeah, not as common, not nearly as common as blackcap, and a good bird to find on the transects. So hopefully this weekend and next weekend we should be able to get a few, find a few. I've got the beacon. So we're now going to have a look at whitethroat. Very much different sort of habitat to different scrubby habitat to blackcap and garden warbler. Blackcap and garden warbler will tend to be in the bigger shrubs and the lower trees within the scrubby area. Blackcaps will also you'll find in the edge of woods, and garden warblers to some extent as well, where the taller trees are. But the whitethroat, this is a bird that we're going to see along hedgerows in the countryside, as well as in the scrubby areas. Do love sort of nettle beds and nettle patches. Cow parsley is something that they do like to perch on. And they are different in that they don't just sing from a perch, they will actually give a song flight. And they will launch up into the air, give a bit of a song for about 20 seconds, and then drop back into the scrubby patch, where they'll remain hidden for a while until they sing again. But compared with blackcap and garden warbler, this is a very different bird in shape, in coloration, and in behaviour and sound. What I didn't mention for blackcap and garden warbler is that they do share a similar call or scolding note, and it's very much quite a sharp sort of tack, quite like two coins being banged together. Very harsh, quite sort of scolding like, but it's a single note, sometimes doubled up into a couple of notes depending on what they're angry about. But the common whitethroat is a very different call. Almost in that particular instance is almost like a sort of a very sort of low, quiet jay-like noise, but it is very different, and it's the sort of thing that they'll give if you're walking past, if they've got a territory along a hedgerow or in a bit of scrub, and you're walking past, and you could likely hear that particular sort of scolding note. In terms of what to look for, I mean, it's partly within the name. They have a very, very white throat, and they have this very, very, looking at the drawings to the right, you can see that at whatever age or sex, they have these very rufusy edges to the wing feathers and the wing coverts, and very, very rufous brown. And then on the back at this time of the year, the adults will be sort of quite grey, and then they'll have this nice grey upper part to the head. And as I say, this nice white throat. They have a much longer tail proportionately to their body than the garden warbler and blackcap, so it tends to make them look longer. So they're probably smaller bodied than a blackcap and a garden warbler. And they tend to have also much more brightly coloured legs, which are quite clear in the photograph on the slide here. Song-wise, quite repetitive, quite short, but can be given several times in a row. So it's quite a quite a distinctive song. As I say, it's not too long. Sometimes it's not always given in song flights. Sometimes they will sit in the hedge and sing, or the bush and sing at you. But it's and they will have occasional other phrases that go along with this core set of notes. But this is the classic whitethroat song, and if we don't hear it this weekend, which I'm sure we should do, then by the time we get to sort of Lodge Hill, then we'll be able to hear some of them singing away there. So quite one of the easier of the scrub warblers to see and to identify. Now we come on to its partner in crime, the lesser whitethroat. So this is a more sturdy bird than the common whitethroat, much more similar really in sort of makeup to the garden warbler and the blackcap. As you can see, it's sort of a medium sort of length tail, quite a sturdy body. It's got a brown back. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of garden warbler, it's a colder brown than the garden warbler. And it does have this grey head, and obviously if you can see the throat, then you'll realise that it's sort of garden warbler because it's got a nice big white throat there. Dark legs similar to blackcap and garden warbler, but really in terms of where you're likely to find them, then this is again more of a bird that you're going to find in the lower scrub, in hedgerows, potentially bottom of blackthorn bushes, whitethorn bushes. Fairly doesn't tend to zip around too much. They're sort of fairly sort of slow moving, and much less so than the common whitethroat, which will accompany you along the whole of its territory. If it's in a hedgerow, it will just follow you along or precede you and then follow you back again. Whitethroats, they'll give you they'll scold at you. You walk past, they might sing, but they don't tend to follow you along the hedge or follow you along the scrub. They tend to be fairly sort of sedentary. So look for the whitethroat. So the nice grey, lead grey head, and sort of a cold brown on the back. And this is the call. So again, this has got something quite in common with blackcap and garden warbler. It's a similar sort of tick note, but it is less harsh and generally sort of a little bit quieter. So with plenty of practice, you can actually start to tell them apart just based on that particular call. But obviously, it does take some practice. So the song for the lesser whitethroat. Quite a little rattle. Fairly simple. Fairly sort of flat in the way that it's delivered. And it's the end, which is that telltale rattle at the end, which is diagnostic. can remind you of chaffinch at some time. Can you just hear that sort of little rattle? But obviously chaffinches don't give that bit at the beginning, so the whole thing is become, you know, the sum of the parts is the clincher. As I say, much more skulking, much more difficult to see. The one we had last year up at Ivinghoe started off as quite skulky, but at the end it offered up some really nice views. So hopefully we can do the same this year. So that's 4 of the Sylvia warblers. So that's garden warbler, black-capped whitethroat, and messer whitethroat. We'll come on and do some go back to compare them in a little while. Just wanted to go on to the grasshopper warbler. So this is from the Locustella genus. And if you look at the drawing on the right here, I'll just get that a bit bigger, make it easier to see. If you look at the right-hand bird here, you look at the shape of the tail, it's quite long and it's quite graduated, so it looks quite rounded when the bird flies away from you. But some of the telltale elements to look for, if you can see the undertail coverts, the undertail coverts are much longer than any of the other scrub warblers that you're likely to see, and they've got these long, the center of the feather is dark, so it looks quite sort of streaked on the underpart, on the undertail feathers, on the tail coverts there. Yep.
Can I jump in there? Anthea, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question? Are you there, Anthea? Do you want to unmute and ask a question, Anthea? Are you with us, Anthea? Anthea, if you can hear us, if you can hear me, feel free to unmute and jump in and ask a question if you can hear us. But I guess otherwise, Dave, if you want to maybe carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to jump in though, Anthea.
So this is a bird that frequently heard but not seen. They do tend to sing from the middle of a bush. Sometimes they will be very, very easy to see, but that is quite unusual. Well, the thing to look for is this sort of dark centers to the flight feathers and some of the coverts. Otherwise, just sort of an olivey brown coloration, as I say, with this longish, graduated, rounded tail, and a very different sort of look to the head, a little spotting on the crown of the head, and the beak is sort of slightly curved. But they do tend to be very, very secretive at times. But one of the things that is distinctive is this song. And what's and they can be quite sort of it can be quite a sort of a ventriloquial feel to it, because depending on which way the bird's head is pointing, depends how loud the sound that you're going to hear. It's not a bird I can hear that easily. Other people can, but if they're looking in a different direction to you, it can be sometimes, even though you can be quite close, they can be quite difficult to hear. But they are quite an uncommon bird in bucks now. So if any of you do manage to find one on your transects, that would be absolutely fantastic, because they are a very nice bird to both listen to and to see. So good luck with that one. Probably mostly on passage in bucks. There are some pairs in Stronghold in North Bucks, around the sort of the Olney area, where there's much more suitable habitat for them. But they can occur in scrubby areas on migration, both northbound and southbound in the autumn. Obviously, they're not singing in the autumn. But yeah, nice bird to try and find. Next one is the sedge warbler, and this is again a different genus. So this is the Acrocephalus Schoenibarmus is the full name. Primarily a bird of the scrub within reed beds, but again on passage in the spring, and sometimes in sort of suitable, sort of slightly damp areas that you might encounter on some of your transects. Then you could be lucky and get one of these turning up. Compared with the grasshopper warbler, it's browner on the back, paler underneath. Still has a sort of a slightly rounded tail, similar to the grasshopper warbler, but it's the head that gives it away from a visual perspective. It's got this dark line on the top of the heads on either side, and then this broad creamy eye stripe above the eye and below the dark bit, which really stands out from quite a long way away. And they tend to be quite prominent when they're singing as well, so they're quite likely to, as the photograph here shows, sit in the open on a bare branch and belt out their song, which is quite loud and is quite an interesting song. It mimics quite a few birds quite often. Bit of it once more. So sort of rattles and churs and some quite sort of fluty notes as well. Quite a good mixture, and as I say, it does tend to sometimes quite mimic quite a few species: starlings, robins, reed warblers, and such like. This is a fairly sort of classic song for them. So you may well find one of these on your transects. Whether it stays and breeds could be another matter, but again, it's another bird of the scrub that you might come across. Now moving on to the Philoscopus warblers, or the leaf warblers. Chiff-chaff. Its song is its name, onomatopoeic. This is the call. Quite distinct disyllabic. And this is the song: chiff-chaff, 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 chiff-chaff. To look at, it's not the brightest of birds. The photograph it shows you the sort of plumage that we're likely to find chiff-chaffs in at this time of year: yellowy, olivey, greeny brown, dusky underneath, sort of buffy, dusky underneath. Slight eye stripe, but things to look for on the bird are the tail, so fairly sort of medium length tail for the size of the bird, but it will flick its tail quite frequently. So that's one characteristic that will separate it from a willow warbler if you're trying to work out the difference between the two. The other thing to look for is the length of you see the primaries here in the photograph, how far they extend beyond the rest of the wing. So these are the primaries here, this little bunch. And they don't extend very far, about to the end of the tail covets, so the undertail covets there. So quite a short wing, blackish legs, thin blackish legs, and the bill is mostly black, so there's not much colour in that. If you look at the drawings, again, mostly dark bill, dark legs, and there's the description of the short primary projection. So simple song, but try and note this call. Quite there's plenty of these around at the moment. So they've been in for a good couple of weeks now, so you should hear and see a few of these at the weekend. So the one to compare it and differentiate it from is the willow warbler. Very similar an initial sight when you see it. So trying to work out which one it is. If it's not singing, then you need to look at, again, look at the general shape of the bird. This one doesn't flick its tail. Tends to have paler legs, sort of an orangey colour. Not always easy to see, depending on the light, but also tends to have orange in the bill here. So you can see the bird singing, or well, if you sing, it's obvious, but you can see the bird and you can see the colour in the bill, and that would help you to differentiate it from the chiffchaff. But as you can see here, in the primary projection is longer than that on the chiffchaff and reaches further down the tail past the end of the undertail covets here, and that's a good giveaway. Apart from that, plumage-wise, willow warblers at this time of the year, they're not the bright yellow that you might expect. That tends to be the juveniles and the immatures in autumn. They tend to be much yellower. This time of the year, the adults are sort of whiter on the belly than chiffchaff, yellower on the flanks, and then sort of a much more of a greener, olivey colour on the back, maybe than the chiffchaff. They look a tidier bird than the chiffchaff. Chiffchaff can look sort of quite dowdy quite a lot of the time, but the willow warbler looks a bit smarter. But you can see in the photograph here the leg colour and the way that the bill colour shows up. And the eye stripe can also tend to be a bit stronger. So those are the scrub warblers. I'm going to have a look at just go through. Want to compare the calls now. We heard the chiffchaff call earlier. If we listen to the willow warbler call. So it wasn't very loud, I'm afraid, but it does tend to be as loud as the chiffchaff. It was much more of a disyllabic call than than the chiffchaff. Well, those are the two together. Common whitethroat, lesser whitethroat. I'll just play the song quickly. So quite short, repetitive. And there's the lesser whitethroat. Slightly less scratchy, slightly more tuneful, but still a sort of a rattle. And obviously compared with blackcap and garden warbler, not nearly as long, not nearly as tuneful. And blackcaps and garden warblers will vary what they deliver. The lesser whitethroat is pretty much the same as is the common whitethroat, in terms of the same, they deliver the same time after time after time. Garden warbler song. So that's almost constant through that 40 odd seconds. This is the blackcap. It's just under 7 seconds. It's about 6 seconds. But they can be longer, but they don't tend to be anywhere near as long as the garden warbler. We just play the grasshopper warbler songs, fairly memorable, so you've got to remember that. And again, the sedge warbler can carry on for quite a long time. So if you do come across something quite unfamiliar, then that will be that could be the sedge warbler that you need to check out. Turn the alarm off. Thank you. Okay, so that's the songs. I was going to switch over to the original presentation now. Go through some of these. So the presentation has got the sounds in it, so we can put this one up, Nick. Okay, so that's it for the warblers. As I say, when it comes to them, it's blackcap is the key to commit to memory, so that you can compare all the others against it. That will help you to come down to identify which species it is. So they're the main species that we're going to cover. I just wanted to cover a few species that we might see this weekend or next weekend, depending on which of the trips that you're going to Ivinghoe Beacon. I just need to pop down here first. Just want to go through the logistics for Saturday and for the following Saturday. So we're meeting at Ivinghoe Beacon National Trust car park. There's the grid reference. Car park is free, and as Nick said, does sometimes have an ice cream van in there, but probably not at 6 o'clock in the morning. Looking for a 6 o'clock start, so you can plan to arrive sort of just before that, so we can get all the logistics out of the way, because I need to get you to sign a form with your emergency contact numbers, etc., etc. Be prepared. Bring several layers with you. Last year, it was flipping freezing up there. Forecast at the moment is looking quite pleasant. It's still going to be sort of fairly cool though, so be prepared to get a bit chilly in the morning. But the forecast is dry with light winds, and the temperature should rise throughout the time that we'll be there. So pace, we're only going to be covering 2 to 3 miles maximum over the 3 hours that we're there. But just bear in mind that there are some steep slopes coming down from the car park and going up to the beacon, so appropriate footwear would be good. So this is the Ordnance Survey map. So P marks the spot where the car park is. You're coming up from some Ivinghoe way. You're coming up the hill. You turn right, then you come up the hill past the beacon, and then you hit the S-bends just past the hill, and then you come up through the trees, and then the car park is on the left-hand side. We'll be spending time where the A is here, in the scrub and at the sides of the woods. May have a look at Steps Hill if there's any, maybe some birds in there, and then working our way up through past the sheep pens and up round the slope to Ivinghoe Beacon and back. The order in which we do it will certainly start at A, and then the order in which we go around via the beacon will depend on the winds and also where the birds might be. There's a picture of the actual terrain from a satellite. So there's the P for the beacon. So look forward to seeing those of you that are going to come on Saturday. It should be a good day. There's a big fall forecast of birds for tomorrow, so hopefully some of those will hang around onto the Saturday, and we should have a good day. So I'll just cover some of the species that we're going to be looking for. I'm not going to go through the songs or the calls. We'll go through those on the day. Skylark is something that we'll be looking for. There'll be plenty of those around. Looking for meadow pipit as well, so we can compare and contrast the difference between the shape and the plumage of both of those species, and hopefully hear the calls from them. Maybe linnets, some of the scrubby areas. Certainly be looking for those. And then yellow hammers once we get out into the more open areas. Hopefully some yellow hammers, and obviously Nick's favourite, corn bunting may well be starting to take voice now. They have been seen up around the beacon by the sheep pens, and if time permits, we may even get over to Pitstone Hill, where there's definitely going to be some singing over there.
I had one on Tuesday up there.
You have one Tuesday, great. And 2 species that we want to be on the lookout for up at Ivinghoe certainly are wheatear, as they make their way north through the county, heading for the peaks of Peak District of Derbyshire, Scotland, anywhere sort of north of the Midlands, where they're going to be breeding, or maybe even some of the what we call the Greenlanders, the birds that migrate all the way from Africa up through the UK and then migrate over past Iceland and over to actually to Greenland itself, where they breed, and then they return all the way back again in the early autumn. It's quite an amazing migratory feat. And then the other one to take account of is the ring ouzel. the upland blackbird. So if we can see some of these, that would be pretty smart. There have been some around. Hopefully there'll be some on Saturday. So look forward to seeing those of you that come along then. Obviously, Nick will get the presentation loaded up when he can. But anyway, thanks for listening, and yeah, get playing the black cap to yourself, and good luck on your transects.
Dave, thank you very much. Just a quick clarification on logistics again. I think, Deborah, you've made to know if you can't make it on Saturday and you want to come Saturday week, then just drop Dave or I a note, or put it on the WhatsApp group so we know to expect you. But yeah, the beauty of staggering the two sessions, that you can swap between the two, because the program's going to mirror. So just let us know which, if you can't make it on Saturday in your day's group and you want to swap, just let us know. But before we head off, anyone got any questions for Dave before we sign off? So we take this bit like an auction. We're going. Sold. So if we take that as a no question, Anthony, your hand's still up. I'm assuming there's if you did have a question, you've answered it yourself, or by the way. But feel free to text me or let me know on the WhatsApp group if you still got a question. But other than that, thank you again for coming tonight. Have great fun on Saturday. Ivinghoe is a pretty interesting place. It could be all sorts pop into Ivinghoe. So maybe look out for a red start or one or two other things as well. You never know what you might find up there as well. There could be all sorts. So enjoy it, and hopefully there's an ice cream for you afterwards. But have fun, everybody. I look forward to hearing how you get on.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Nick.
Cheers,
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.